Hey folks, a couple thoughts on my mind today. One of them I mentioned in a previous video, and that's the difference between a prepper and a gardener. So obviously, many of us have gardens, but really, is there a difference? Well, I think there is, because every spring I see a lot of gardeners at the garden shop, Home Depot, Lowe's, wherever, buying plants, buying materials, potting soil, what have you, fertilizer, everything like that. Those are gardeners. Now I think a prepper is somebody who thought about, well, what happens if there's a national catastrophe in the fall or the winter? What happens if an EMP hits in November? And that following spring, there's no electric grid, there's no Home Depot, Lowe's, or a garden shop, and then what am I going to do? So a prepper is somebody who already thought about that. And for example, as I mentioned in my heirloom seed project, the reason I'm doing that, it's not that I'm like this, big anti-GMO, anti-Monsanto, activist or anything like that. But the fact of the matter is, if I want to be able to grow my own food, and if it's unavailable that we'd be able to get plants or seeds in the spring when we wanted to do it, then what do? Well, what did they do back in the olden days? They did things from seed. So one of my preps this year is a knowledge prep. I want to become skilled and adept at growing plants from seed and then saving the seeds for the following year. And that would be one of my preps. So if, God forbid, something happened, grid went down in the fall, I've at least got a start on my food production for the next year. I've got heirloom seeds that I know what I'm going to be able to grow with them, and in sufficient quantity that I'd be able to put a crop in the ground. And be able to ramp up production from my peacetime garden into my wartime garden, where I would be able to produce a lot more food. So that's one of the things that I've been thinking about, and not just seeds, but any other supplies that you might need. So one of the things that I did was I experimented with growing seeds from garden soil versus potting soil versus seed starting mix. Well, what if the grid goes down and there's no Home Depot and Lowe's and you can't get seed starting mix? You're going to have to do something else. Many of us at the end of the season have some potting soil left over, so you can certainly do that. But, can you grow, seeds from garden soil? Or, in the alternative, what I'm thinking about is I've got seed starting mix for next year. So at least for 1 year I would have it available until, I got things up and running. And then maybe I'll think about, getting enough that I would have it for a couple years down the road. So if you think that seed starting mix is something that's necessary, you'd want to be able to think about, do I have enough for next year? What I found when I did the experiment is, in fact, the seed starting mix, the plants were much bigger in the greenhouse. As they grew, it did make a difference. However, I don't think it was a war stopper difference. I had plenty of seeds pop up in the potting soil and plenty pop up in the garden soil in various degrees. The plants didn't get quite as big. As you would expect, they did best in the seed starting mix, second best in the potting soil, and then third best in the garden soil. But, I don't know what they used back in the 1800s, but I don't know whether they had the same seed starting mix, that we do, or what they used. But what I found was I can get away with using garden soil or potting soil, and my seeds will still grow. So that's a good piece of knowledge to know. We're not going to necessarily have Google or the internet or all the things we have now when we have a question to answer it. So it brings me to kind of another topic. Recently, one of our libraries in the area here had a used book sale. Doesn't sound like that big of a deal to many people. Maybe people like books and would go, maybe not. But what my wife and I did is we went there and we looked for prepper books. We looked for books on gardening, books on various homesteading skills, and lo and behold, we found a lot of them. There were a lot of really good books. Plants, gardening, home improvement books, all kinds of things with knowledge that we might need and we don't necessarily have. But, without an internet to Google, like right now, if we want to know how to fix a faucet, we can just Google it, watch a couple of videos, go out by the park. But if we don't have that, it's good to have some books with the type of knowledge that you think you might need in a grid down scenario, long term. And specifically for me, I wanted plant recognition, I wanted gardening, I wanted medical, I wanted various homesteading skills, and I found those books used for dirt cheap. Literally, I think we spent $20 and we came out with 2 armfuls of really, really relevant prepper skills books. Books not specifically written for preppers, but with the skills that we need. So, there's a million prepping books out there. Just go to Amazon and Google it, and you'll see them all. And, many of them are very good. I'm not criticizing them. A lot of them kind of do the same thing over and over, give you the same tips. But you can find books in a library book sale or a tag sale, someplace where they're selling used books, on a lot of the same skills, dirt cheap. And as a matter of fact, much more detail. A lot of the prepping books, the typical 100 things you should do to prepare for the end of the world and all that type of thing. They may have very good information, but perhaps not very detailed. So it's good to have detailed information available. I don't know everything. I've never claimed to know everything. And guess what? I never will know everything. But I got a lot of books, which could be very, very helpful, to increase the knowledge base of myself and my family and our group if something bad happens. Another thing to think about is you can't gear your way out of the apocalypse. So I'm sorry, but no matter how much money you spend on fancy gear and all of this high-speed death machine airborne crap, that's not the most important thing. I think personally the most important thing is skills. You can have all the gear in the world. If you starve to death, you starve to death. But having the skills to be able to grow food, gather food, hide your food, that's pretty critical. So I think a lot of newer preppers tend to make the mistake of spending a lot of money on stuff that really it's maybe nice to have, but not 100% necessary. I personally believe that skills are much more important than stuff. So yes, you should absolutely store food. You should absolutely get the supplies that you think you would need. But that being said, don't neglect skills. That's the most important thing. So let's say, for example, weapons. If you don't practice and you don't have any skills in the weapons, then the weapons are not as effective, not as useful. You can have gardens, but if you don't use them, if you don't plant anything, you don't practice, then your skills will be lacking when you really need them the most. And especially if things go wrong. One of the things I need to get more experience in is, what do I do if, particular insects are attacking my plants or, animals, how to protect, the plants. And so that I'm going to get through experience. I found some rabbits eating the strawberries, so I tightened up the fence, and they seem to be fine now. So really, you should think about, especially if you're a new prepper, skills are more important than stuff. Now, the good news about that is skills are generally less expensive than stuff. Skills can be things that you do on your own that cost relatively little. I mean, other than formal training, which of course people are going to charge you for that, and you know, it's necessary to have. But on the other hand, you also may have, for example, you might have a friend who's a firearms expert who could actually teach you some of those skills, and then maybe you've got a skill that you could, you know, trade to your friend. Okay, so look, I have medical knowledge, so I'll teach you some medical and first aid, and you teach me firearms. And so for basically no cost at all, two preppers have helped each other out in developing their skills and you know, furthering their survival capabilities. And also it's a nice, you know, kind of networking thing, because, you know, we're not going to be able to lone wolf it. Communities are going to be critical. Of course, I would say that, wouldn't I? But it is true. Lone wolf preppers are going to have a very, very hard time unless you're in a situation where you can avoid human contact for 2 years or so, however long the apocalypse lasts. You're going to come into contact with people. And as time goes on, you're going to be coming into contact with desperate, hungry people, and lots of them. So I don't care how good you think you are with your weapons and, you know, your security system and everything. If there are 20 or 30 hungry people coming up your driveway armed, you ain't going to stop them alone. And, you know, you and your small family or your small group's not going to stop them alone. So communities are critical. That's another thing you have to really think about is one of the prepper mantras is the bug out. So, you know, if the S hits the F, we're going to bug out. We're going to grab our bug out bags full of Mountain House dehydrated food and water filters and all that stuff, and we're going to bug out. Okay, well, where are you going to bug out to? So perhaps there are those out there who have the resources that they have a really good bug out location. They own a second piece of property way in upstate, wherever, where, you know, they're going to be very, very secluded and nobody will find them, and, you know, they can cache a bunch of preps so that they'll be available. That's great. If you've got that, great. For the rest of us who are in a situation where we don't really have anywhere else to go, we've got our homes, you know, what are we going to do? We're going to go in the woods? Well, unless your name is Jeremiah Johnson, the woods is a bad idea. Number one, there isn't going to be a whole lot of food there because everyone else is going in the woods. So game is going to be scarce. Shelter is going to be a problem. So, you know, if your bug out plan is we're going to grab our bug out bags and go to the mountains or go to the woods, you really need to rethink your plan. So that is why community is very important. If your community can survive, if your neighborhood can survive, if people can band together, your town can band together, everybody's chance of survival increases. So that's just something to think about, that if you're lone wolfing it, you're going to have problems. When lots and lots of hungry people are out there looking for resources and you're the only one with resources, they're likely to find you. And when they do find you, they're not likely to go away without what you have. And the only way I can think of that you can fix that is either A, be so secluded that they'll never find you, which not all of us have the resources to do, or B, get your community strong enough that it would be able to survive a long-term national catastrophe. Thank you very much for watching.